It has felt lately like the world has not stopped asking all of us to respond to it. In the months leading up to the last week's election, I really, frankly, over the last 9 years, I have been asked as your rabbi to sign letter after letter and statement after statement during elections, and then during COVID, and then during elections, and then after October 7th, for one cause, and then another cause, and then another one, and another one. Every time something happens in this world, another organization wants me or wants us as a congregation to stand up, to say something, and to take a stand. And sometimes we should. When hatred rises in plain sight, when lies take root, when our neighbors are unsafe, all of these may be moments that genuinely require moral clarity. Indeed, some moments ask us to steady the world with our voice, to protect the vulnerable, and to remind our community what dignity sounds and looks like. There are other times, though, that I have found myself staring at a draft statement thinking, yikes, I am not so sure. I don't know what's true here. I don't know what will help. Or where I realize that weighing in will make no difference at all, or even worse, that nothing good will actually come from it. I have also become acutely aware that for some, silence feels like betrayal. And I have to tell you that all of it is exhausting. Not because I do not care, but because I care deeply. I still believe that words have weight. And when every issue feels absolutely urgent, the danger is that our speech becomes reflex rather than reflection. I think that beneath the pressure of all of this is something deeper and something more difficult, which I think we need to name. And that is our shared culture is fraying, that people feel unmoored. The many articles have shown that trust in institutions has been collapsing, that many people feel abandoned by the systems that were supposed to hold them. And every crisis becomes another loyalty test. Every demand becomes a warning that if we do not speak quickly, we might lose the thread of belonging. And that is where I have been living as a rabbi lately, in the space between urgency and understanding, between the need to speak and the need to breathe, between conviction and curiosity. Maybe that is why this week's Torah portion, Chayei Sarah, feels so alive right now. Because it is a story about what we do when we do not yet know what to do. It's a story about a man, perhaps named Eleazar, who was sent on an impossible mission, armed with nothing but a prayer, a pause, and the hope that kindness might show him the way. You see that Chayei Sarah, which is weird because it says the life of Sarah, begins when Sarah dies. And Abraham, who is now really, really old, much older than 50, okay? Like almost 120. Calls his most trusted servant and gives him a nearly impossible task. Go to my homeland, he says, and find a wife for my son Isaac. No photograph, no GPS, no map, no clear directions, just faith, exhaustion, and a vague promise that God will somehow guide him. And Eleazar travels across the desert and eventually stops beside a well. And there he prays, not for control, not for certainty, but for a sign of kindness. He says, let the woman who offers water not only to me, but also to my camels be the one. And he had like 10 camels with him, so that's a lot of water. And before he even finishes, a young woman named Rebecca appears. And she sees the stranger, who is dusty from his travels, standing beside 10 camels. And without hesitation, she draws water for him. Then again and again and again for the 10 animals until every one of them had had enough to drink. And then the Torah adds a small, quiet line in Genesis 24:21. It says, the man watched her silently, macharish lehada'at, waiting, pausing, silently, to discover whether the Eternal had made his journey successful. He stays silent. He pauses. And he lets Rebecca's kindness reveal what certainty cannot. That silence, that pause, I want to argue, is the hinge of the story. Because it's where faith meets uncertainty. It is where the Torah invites us into the practice of safek, the sacred act of doubt. Rabbi Michael Marmer, my teacher, teaches that safek, sacred doubt, taking time to pause, is not weakness or indecision. It is the courage to hold yes and no lightly in our hands, to feel the pull of competing goods, to stay present when the path is really complicated. Judaism does not eliminate doubt. It refines it. It makes doubt a part of our moral method. And this week, our Sage class began studying the Talmud. And if you want to join us, please do. Because what I love about Talmud and teaching the Talmud is that it is not a book of answers, it's a book of arguments. It's the record of a people learning to live inside tension without losing faith. And the servant's pause, Eleazar's pause at the well, is the first expression of that kind of faith. Because he waits, he watches, and then he acts. You see, we live in a world that rewards speed. Every hour brings a new outrage, a new headline, a new demand to react. And beneath the noise is something real. Grief and pain and fear and loneliness. The ache of not knowing what comes next. That's real. Recent polls have shown that people are scared about the direction of our country. And when people are scared, they often reach for the illusion of perfect certainty. They reach for an illusion that some people will have all of the answers. Answers that feel solid even when those answers are false or binary. Because people want to know who is to blame. They want explanations that seem clear in a world that feels impossible. And that is why, I have to say, conspiracies flourish. It's why extremism grows. It's why anti-Semitism is spreading across the political spectrum of the right and the left, because people grasp for simple stories when life gets complex. I read an article this week describing young people who have lost faith in every institution. It described a generation that feels economically squeezed, culturally abandoned, spiritually unanchored. And I want to argue that maybe this is why the pause matters. Not as avoidance, but as a way of finding discernment. It is the breath between stimulus and response where conscience has a time to speak. And all around us, people are sure. They're sure that their side alone has all of the facts. They're sure that their anger is righteous and everyone else is corrupt. Sure that their newsfeed or partisan political party or perspective is the only truth. And maybe that is what frightens me the most. Not that we have stopped believing, but that we have stopped wondering about viewpoint diversity. That we are so quick to condemn someone for holding another perspective rather than asking, tell me more about how you got there and why. When we lose the capacity to imagine that another person's view might contain a fragment of truth, then we quickly move from conviction to contempt. And that is the soil where hatred grows and extremism thrives. Our tradition insists on something harder. Hold your truths fiercely, our tradition says, and also make room for someone else's. Defend what you love without assuming that disagreement equals some type of betrayal. And that is what the safek, the pause, demands of us. Not moral relativism, but moral humility. The recognition that even when I am right, I may not be wholly right. The pause becomes a spiritual practice. It gives us time to ask, what am I really responding to? Whose pain am I missing? Will my words build, or will my words break? And then, after the pause, we act. We can protest. We protect. We teach. We build. But we do so with integrity and not out of a place of panic. With clarity rather than some type of contagion. And it's that kind of courage that we honor, for example, when we honor our veterans. Many who served were no older than our children when they were sent into uncertainty. And they acted with full clarity, yet with deep commitment. Their courage was not blind conviction, it was disciplined faith. And the same week, we mark the anniversary of Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, when state-sponsored hatred erupted in flames. It was a moment when thousands of Jews were attacked, arrested, and killed. It was also a moment when too many neighbors and nations hesitated. Kristallnacht teaches us that silence in the face of cruelty is never neutral. Veterans Day and Kristallnacht call us to both discernment and action, because the world needs measured reflection and it needs moral courage too. And that is what this moment asks of us, to pause long enough to discern what is true and then to move, to lead with kindness strengthened by our reflections. Judaism has never been a religion of passivity, and that rhythm, pause and then act, is the spiritual practice of safek. It is how we turn doubt into wisdom and fear into promise. Because Eleazar taught us to pause, and Rebecca teaches us to move. And together, they remind us that faith is not certainty, and doubt is not failure. They are the twin disciplines of a people who believe that moral life begins with listening, with learning, with debating, and coming alive through courageous action. Shabbat Shalom.